This was the moment a comedian and a wrestler turned a late-night talk show into a street fight and fooled all of America. This was the slap seen round the world, a piece of television so volatile it felt like the entire show was about to collapse in on itself. But what if I told you the slap, the fight, and the years of bitter hatred were all part of one of the most elaborate, perfectly executed hoaxes in TV history? This is the inside story of the lie that blurred the line between entertainment and reality forever. This is how two masters of their craft, from two completely different worlds, conspired to pull off a work of performance art so convincing, we're still talking about it more than 40 years later. To understand how this all happened, you first have to understand Andy Kaufman. And the first thing to know about him? He wasn't a comedian. He'd be the first person to tell you that. In his own words, I am not a comic. I have never told a joke. Kaufman was a performance artist, a provocateur who used awkwardness and confusion as his primary weapons. His goal wasn't just to make you laugh, it was to make you feel something.
I loved him so much. I know. He was a good father, a loving husband.
Hey, come on, you think you'll feel bad? The guy owed me $100.
Even if that feeling was anger, discomfort, or just plain bewilderment. He became a household name playing the sweet, lovable mechanic Latka Gravas on the hit sitcom Taxi. But the real Andy Kaufman was the guy you saw on stage, the one who would read The Great Gatsby out loud to a restless audience until they either walked out or started a riot. He was the one who would unleash his obnoxious lounge singer character, Tony Clifton, just to insult the crowd. Kaufman's whole career was built on one powerful question: is this real? He danced on the line between his characters and his true self so masterfully that the audience, and sometimes even his own friends, could never be sure which Andy they were getting. By the late 1970s, Kaufman had a new obsession, one that seemed bizarre even for him: professional wrestling. He didn't just love the spectacle, he loved the psychology. He loved the pure, unfiltered hatred a good villain, a heel in wrestling lingo, could stir up. He saw wrestling as the ultimate form of theater, where the audience wasn't just watching a story, they were part of it. And Andy Kaufman didn't want to be a hero. He wanted to be the most despised man in the whole sport. So, he created a new persona: the Intergender Wrestling Champion of the world! He'd get in the ring and taunt every woman in the audience, offering a $1,000 prize to any woman who could pin him, all while delivering misogynistic rants designed to make people furious. He'd say women belonged in the kitchen, that they were intellectually inferior, all with a smug, condescending grin. The act was brilliant because it was so offensive. It wasn't comedy, it was pure villainy. He was taking his high-concept performance art and dropping it right into the raw, blue-collar world of pro wrestling. The problem was, the wrestling world initially wanted nothing to do with him. He was a Hollywood actor making a mockery of their business. Kaufman approached the big wrestling promotions of the day, like the then WWF, but was turned down. They didn't get that being seen as a joke was the entire point. While Kaufman was getting rejected up in the Northeast, a whole different kind of royalty was holding court hundreds of miles away in the South. In Memphis, Tennessee, wrestling wasn't just entertainment, it was practically a religion, and its god was Jerry the King Lawler. Back in the era of wrestling territories, before one company dominated everything, dozens of regional promotions operated like their own little kingdoms. Each had its own stars, its own storylines, and its own fiercely loyal fans. In Memphis, the Mid-South Coliseum was Lawler's castle, and every Monday night, he was on the throne. Lawler wasn't just the top star, he was a local icon, a real-life superhero to the people of Memphis. He was a brawler and a great talker, and he understood the business better than almost anyone. And that business was built on one sacred principle: kayfabe. Think of kayfabe as the unspoken contract between wrestlers and the audience. It's the code of silence, the collective agreement to present the staged world of wrestling as 100% real. To outsiders, wrestling might be fake, But inside the territory, you never, ever broke kayfabe. On-screen rivals didn't travel together, they didn't eat at the same restaurants, and they definitely didn't appear as friends in public. The illusion of reality was everything. It's what made people buy tickets. It's what made them believe. And Jerry Lawler was one of its most dedicated guardians. He knew that the second the audience stopped believing, the magic was gone. So when this Hollywood comedian, this star of Taxi, started sending videotapes of his act to promoters, most of them tossed the tapes in the trash. They saw Kaufman as a threat to kayfabe, someone making fun of their livelihood. But when the tapes landed on the desk of Memphis promoter Jerry Jarrett, he and Lawler didn't see a joke. They saw an opportunity. They saw dollar signs. Lawler understood something the other promoters missed. He knew the people of Memphis wouldn't see Kaufman as a comedian trying to be a wrestler. They'd see him as an arrogant, condescending Hollywood elitist coming to their town to insult them, their women, and their way of life. Kaufman wouldn't just be a wrestling heel, he'd be the ultimate outsider, a real-life villain they would pay anything to see get destroyed. Lawler realized Kaufman wasn't trying to expose the business, he was trying to become its most hated character. And in professional wrestling, hatred is the fuel that makes the engine run. The collision was inevitable. The plan was set in motion. The partnership began in secret. Behind the scenes, Lawler and Kaufman were collaborators, two artists from different worlds who saw a shared genius in each other. They'd meet discreetly to plan their angle, often in Lawler's hotel room. Publicly, however, they were bitter enemies from day one. Kaufman didn't arrive in Memphis as a visiting celebrity. He arrived like an invading army. He unleashed a series of promos that were masterpieces of psychological warfare. He didn't just insult the fans, he condescended to them with a level of patronizing arrogance that drove them into a frenzy. He made instructional videos on how to use soap, implying the people of Memphis were unhygienic. He called the city the nation's redneck capital and treated the whole population with utter disdain. He brought his Intergender Wrestling Championship to the Mid-South Coliseum, continuing to wrestle women and berate them. The Memphis crowd, conditioned by years of traditional good versus evil stories, reacted with pure, unfiltered rage. They didn't see an actor playing a part, they saw a real-life villain who desperately needed to be taught a lesson. The storyline kept escalating. During one of Kaufman's matches, Lawler, who was doing commentary at ringside, started coaching Kaufman's female opponent. After Kaufman won, he refused to let go of the pin. Lawler, defending the woman's honor, jumped in the ring and pushed the comedian off her. The crowd erupted. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. Their hero was finally standing up to the Hollywood loudmouth. Kaufman, ever the showman, acted shocked and indignant. How dare a real wrestler lay a hand on him? The challenge was made. On April 5th, 1982, Andy Kaufman would step into the ring not with a woman from the audience, but with the King of Memphis himself, Jerry Lawler. The build-up was immense. The story had everything: an outsider versus the hometown hero, Hollywood versus Memphis, brains versus brawn. For the people of Memphis, this wasn't just another wrestling match. This was a fight for their honor. And for Kaufman and Lawler, it was the first act of their grand deception, playing out exactly as they had designed. On April 5th, 1982, the Mid-South Coliseum was packed with over 10,000 fans, all there for one reason: to see Jerry Lawler shut Andy Kaufman's mouth for good. The air was thick with genuine hatred. From the second he stepped through the ropes, Kaufman played his part perfectly. He stalled, he ran, he acted terrified, anything to avoid actually fighting Lawler. He was the classic chicken heel, the coward who talks a big game but is scared to back it up. Lawler, on the other hand, was all business. He let Kaufman grandstand for a bit, then grabbed the mic and broke the fourth wall in a way that only made the illusion deeper. He asked, "Did you come down here to wrestle or act like an ass?" The Coliseum exploded. The line between performance and reality had just been erased. The match itself was short and brutal, exactly as it needed to be. Lawler, the seasoned pro, completely dominated the comedian. He threw Kaufman around the ring like a rag doll. Then came the moment that would define the entire feud. Lawler lifted Kaufman upside down and dropped him on his head with a pile driver, an illegal move in Memphis wrestling that guaranteed a disqualification. And he didn't just do it once, he did it again. Because of the illegal moves, Lawler was disqualified, meaning Kaufman technically won the match. But that hardly mattered. Kaufman sold the injury like his life depended on it. He lay motionless on the mat as the referee stopped the match. The performance wasn't over. Kaufman refused to get up and insisted on being taken out on a stretcher. He was carried out of the arena and taken to a local hospital, all while the cameras rolled. Here's where the hoax became truly brilliant. While the feud was a work, Kaufman's trip to the hospital was real, lending it an incredible air of authenticity. He was admitted to St. Francis Hospital and spent 3 days there, some of which was reportedly in traction. Lawler and others would later confirm that the injury was mostly for show, an exaggeration to sell the story. But by mixing this kernel of reality into their fiction, they made the entire thing believable. National news outlets picked up the story. A TV star had been seriously injured in a wrestling match. For the world outside of Memphis, the question was no longer about wrestling. It was about whether they had just witnessed a man's career, and maybe even his life, nearly ended in the ring. In the weeks that followed, Andy Kaufman turned his very real, though exaggerated, injury into the single greatest prop in performance art history, the neck brace. He was never seen in public without it. The brace became a physical symbol of his victimhood, a constant reminder of the brutality he had suffered at the hands of Jerry Lawler. Kaufman, the master manipulator, went on a media blitz. He showed up on talk shows, not as a comedian, but as a wounded man seeking justice. He was soft-spoken, seemingly humbled, and claimed his wrestling days were over. He threatened to sue Jerry Lawler for millions, claiming the pile driver had caused permanent damage. Every interview was a masterclass in staying in character. He never winked at the audience. He never let the mask slip for a second. He was completely, utterly committed to the lie. This sustained performance was key. The feud didn't end in Memphis. Kaufman and Lawler kept the story alive for months, building a national narrative. They were creating a long-form, episodic story that played out across multiple media platforms: wrestling shows, news reports, and talk shows. This was years before the internet and social media, yet they were basically orchestrating a viral event in slow motion. The public was hooked. People who had never watched a minute of professional wrestling were now invested in this bizarre grudge. The tension just kept building, a simmering pot waiting to boil over. Kaufman kept demanding an apology and a rematch. Lawler refused, doubling down on his insults and showing zero remorse. It was clear this couldn't be solved in a Memphis wrestling ring anymore. The feud had gotten too big. It needed a national stage. It needed a neutral ground where the whole world could watch them finally confront each other. And they found the perfect place, the set of America's hippest new late-night talk show. July 28, 1982. The stage was set for one of the most infamous moments in television history. Andy Kaufman, still sporting his neck brace, and Jerry Lawler were both guests on Late Night with David Letterman. This was a huge deal. Late Night was the epitome of cool, ironic entertainment, the exact opposite of the sweaty, sincere world of Memphis wrestling. Bringing their raw, violent feud into this sophisticated space was like dropping a shark into a swimming pool. Behind the scenes, Kaufman and Lawler had a plan. They decided that at some point, Lawler would slap Kaufman. It was all part of the act. But they made a crucial decision that would guarantee the segment's legendary status. They wouldn't tell anyone else. Not the producers, not the crew, and most importantly, not David Letterman. They wanted Letterman's reaction, and the reaction of everyone in that studio, to be completely 100% genuine. The interview began, and you could feel the tension immediately. Letterman, caught in the middle, tried to be the peacemaker, but the animosity between his two guests was just too thick. Kaufman, in his meek, injured persona, quietly demanded an apology. Lawler, arrogant and dismissive, just sat there smirking. He insulted Kaufman, calling him a wimp and a crybaby. As the segment wore on, Kaufman got more agitated and Lawler got more condescending. The insults turned more personal. Then, as Letterman was trying to go to a commercial break, Lawler had had enough. He turned to Kaufman and said, "I'm a little sick of this." He stood up and delivered a hard, open-palmed slap right across Kaufman's face. The sound echoed through the studio. Kaufman went flying backward off his chair. The studio audience gasped. Letterman, visibly shocked, stood up and said, "Oh boy." For a few seconds it was pure chaos. Nobody knew if this was real. This was national television, and it had seemingly spiraled out of control. After a moment, a furious Kaufman stormed back onto the stage. This was no longer the meek victim. This was pure rage. He launched into a tirade of curses, a string of expletives so intense they're still bleeped out to this day. He then grabbed Letterman's mug, threw coffee all over Jerry Lawler, and stormed off the set. The audience was in stunned silence. David Letterman, the unflappable host, looked straight into the camera, totally bewildered, and tried to save his show. He had no idea what had just happened. The hoax was a massive success. The Letterman incident was a cultural explosion. The next day, it was all anyone was talking about. Was it real? Had a pro wrestler actually assaulted a beloved TV star on national television? NBC's phone lines were flooded with calls from viewers who were concerned and outraged. The story was covered by mainstream news, from local papers to national broadcasts. The line between entertainment and reality had been completely obliterated. For years, both Kaufman and Lawler masterfully kept up the deception. They never admitted it was a work. Lawler continued to be the unapologetic villain, and Kaufman continued to play the martyr. The feud itself cooled down after the Letterman appearance. It was pretty hard to top that level of drama, but the animosity was kept alive. Even up to Kaufman's tragic death from cancer in 1984, the two never publicly broke character. The performance simply never ended. The brilliance of the whole thing was in the commitment. They fooled everyone. The fans, the media, their fellow performers, and a national TV audience. They understood that the most powerful question you can make an audience ask is this real? And for the better part of 2 years, the answer was a deeply uncertain maybe. The truth didn't come out in one big reveal. It slowly trickled out over more than a decade. Inside the wrestling business, it was an open secret, a legendary piece of promotional genius. But to the general public, the myth of their real-life hatred lasted for years. The full story wasn't really confirmed for the mainstream until an Emmy-nominated 1995 NBC special, A Comedy Salute to Andy Kaufman, where the secret was finally revealed to a wide audience. Later, in his 2002 autobiography, Lawler detailed how he and his friend Andy Kaufman planned the whole thing. And even then, there were layers. Lawler noted that while the slap on Letterman was planned, Kaufman's profanity-laced tirade and the coffee throwing were his own brilliant improvisations, adding a layer of genuine, unpredictable chaos to their plan. So why do we still talk about this feud today? Why does a staged fight from over 4 decades ago still resonate so powerfully? Because the Kaufman-Lawler feud wasn't just a great wrestling angle, it was a watershed moment in pop culture that changed the rules of entertainment. You can see its fingerprints all over wrestling, comedy, and television. For professional wrestling, this was a pivotal moment. It was arguably the most successful early example of a worked shoot, a storyline designed to feel unscripted and intensely real. It brought a level of mainstream media attention to a regional wrestling promotion that was previously unimaginable. Wrestling historian Bill Apter even argued this was the start of what we know as sports entertainment today. The feud served as a prototype for the reality-based, anti-hero-driven storylines that would define wrestling's most popular era, the Attitude Era, in the late 1990s. It proved that blurring the lines between fiction and reality was a license to print money. For comedy and performance art, The Feud was Andy Kaufman's magnum opus. It was the ultimate expression of his artistic philosophy. He took his crusade against traditional entertainment to the biggest possible stage and made the entire country part of his act. He proved that a performance doesn't have to be stuck on a stage or a screen. It can bleed into real life. He manipulated the media, played with public perception, and committed to a character for years, all to create a singular, unforgettable experience. He wasn't just telling a story, he was living it. And for television, the Letterman incident remains an iconic moment. It was a perfect storm of planning and improvisation that created the illusion of television gone horribly wrong. It cemented David Letterman's show as the place where anything could happen, and became a benchmark for chaotic, unpredictable talk show moments. Even though it was a work, it felt more real than most reality TV does today. In the end, the story of Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler is a story about two brilliant performers who understood their crafts so deeply that they were able to merge them into something entirely new. A comedian who wanted nothing more than to be truly hated, and a wrestler who understood that real hatred was the most valuable commodity in his business. Together, they built a lie so convincing that, for millions of people, it became the truth. They didn't just stage a fight, they staged reality. They forced the media, celebrity culture, and the audience itself to question what they were seeing. They proved that the line between a scripted performance and an authentic moment isn't a wall, but a thin veil. And for a brief, glorious time in the early 1980s, they pulled that veil over the eyes of an entire nation. The Feud was a masterpiece of deception, a landmark of performance art, and a story that, even after we know the truth, remains one of the greatest tricks ever pulled. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of entertainment's greatest hoaxes, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our future explorations of pop culture history. And in the comments below, let us know. If you saw it back then, did you think The Feud was real? We'd love to hear your story. Thanks for watching.